Hey there, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something called differentiated teaching. Now, this is a really powerful strategy that's all about unlocking the potential of every single student. So let's get into it and see how it really works.
You know, this is the big one, right? It's the question every single teacher asks themselves. You've got this room full of students, but it's not one big group. Nope, it's a room full of individuals. Every one of them has a different starting point, a different learning speed, and a totally unique way of looking at things. So, how in the world are you supposed to teach all of them effectively at the same time?
All right, so here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll talk about the big problem, the one-size-fits-none classroom. Then, we'll get into the solution. After that, we'll look at the evidence, check out the playbook, hear some real stories, and finally, map out your path to becoming a pro at this.
Okay, let's kick things off with that core challenge I just mentioned, what we're calling the one-size-fits-none classroom. I mean, at the end of the day, this is what it's all about, right? The goal isn't just to teach to the middle of the class. It's not just about helping struggling students catch up. It's about pushing every single student forward, no matter where they're starting from. And let's be honest, a rigid one-size-fits-all approach, it's just never going to get that job done.
So if one size fits none, what does fit? Well, that leads us right to the solution. It's a whole framework for teaching that's actually tailored to the learners themselves.
And this is the big idea right here, differentiated teaching. Now, it's not about creating 30 completely different lesson plans for 30 kids. Phew. It's really about being responsive. It's a toolkit, a set of methods that let a teacher adjust what they're doing based on where students are at in 3 key areas: their readiness, their interests, and their own unique learning style.
Okay, so how do you actually do that? Well, it boils down to these 3 key adjustments. You can switch up the content. That's what students are learning. You can adjust the process. That's how they're learning it and making sense of it. And you can vary the product, which is how they show you what they've learned. Content, process, product. Simple.
Okay, this all sounds really good in theory, doesn't it? But the big question is, does it actually work? Well, let's take a look at the data, because the evidence behind this kind of teaching is, well, it's not just clear, it's pretty stunning.
But first, just a real quick explainer on something called effect size. Basically, it's just a number researchers use to measure how much impact a strategy has. The important thing to know is that anything over 0.4 is considered a pretty big deal. So, the higher the number, the more powerful the teaching strategy is.
And here it is. This is the big reveal, a strategy called response to intervention, or RTI, which is basically a super structured version of differentiation, has an effect size of, wait for it, 1.07. Now, to put that into perspective, that is huge. It's literally one of the highest effect sizes you'll find for any strategy in education. It just goes to show how incredibly powerful this targeted approach can be.
All right, so we know this stuff is powerful, but what does it actually look like in a classroom? Let's open up the playbook because we need to clear up what differentiation is and maybe more importantly, what it is not.
Okay, pay attention to this because it's super important. On one hand, you've got real differentiation. That's when you're using pre-assessments to figure out where kids are starting from. It's when you have high expectations for everybody and you're constantly checking in to see how they're doing. It's about using open-ended tasks where everyone can find their own level of challenge. Now, what it's not just giving everyone the exact same worksheet. It's not something you only do for the gifted kids, and it's definitely not about sticking kids in rigid groups they can never get out of.
Okay, so theory is great, but let's see this thing in the wild. We're going to dive into a couple of stories from the field to see what this looks like in a real school with real teachers and real students.
So, for our first case study, let's head to a high school in Melbourne. There was a group of language teachers there, and they had a problem. They noticed a lot of their students were just stuck. They weren't making progress. And their old strategy of just handing out extra worksheets for revision or extension, yeah, that wasn't cutting it. So they decided to get serious. First, they actually appointed data managers to create detailed profiles for each class. With that data, they could set super specific learning goals. They started using flexible groups that changed based on who needed what. And, this is the key, they used on-the-spot interventions. Just quick, in-the-moment feedback to fix a mistake right then and there.
And guess what? It worked. Big time. Why? Well, this quote says it all. It let them stop guessing and start teaching to the exact point where a student needed help. That precision, that is the secret sauce.
All right, for story number 2, we're going to a primary school, into a math class. And they were facing a challenge that I'm sure sounds familiar to a lot of you. How do you teach math to a classroom where some kids are flying and others are really struggling, all at the same time?
Their solution was really cool. They decided to flip their classrooms. What does that mean? Well, they recorded their main lessons as short videos that students could watch at home or at their own pace. And this was a total game changer. Why? Because it freed up all this class time for the stuff that really matters, working one-on-one with students or in small groups. And the benefits were just massive. Teachers got more actual face-to-face time with their students. The students got way more individual support, and they had the flexibility to rewatch videos if they were stuck or skip ahead if they got it. I mean, it was a total win-win.
Okay, so we've covered the what, the why, and the how. But look, becoming great at this doesn't happen overnight. And that's what our final section is all about. Seeing this as a journey, not just a switch you can flip.
Think of this as your roadmap for getting better and better. It breaks it down into 4 stages. You start at emerging, where you're just starting to try different strategies. Then you move to evolving, where you're using data to see what kids need. At the embedding stage, that data is actually shaping your whole curriculum. And finally, when you're excelling, this is just how you teach. You're teaching up, giving everyone challenging work, and then providing the exact support they need to get there.
So the big takeaway here is that nobody expects you to be an expert from day one. This is a journey. It's really just about figuring out, okay, where am I right now? And then what's my next step?
And that really brings us to our final question for you. When you think about your own classroom or your own school, what's just one small thing you could try? One step you can take on this path? Maybe it's a new way to pre-assess or trying one open-ended task. Whatever it is, just remember that every single step forward makes a huge difference.